evolving potentially into is fairly consistent with the collective impact model of change and the way that those collective impact models are created. So we talked about kind of morphing what was, I don't know, okay, so kind of morphing the design of the org chart that was there, which felt a little more hierarchical and having more leadership structure than was really intended. So part of that is if you kind of take the collective impact model, and you have a backbone organization and the leadership, instead of having a leadership and a staff, the leadership really comes from the steering committee and the staffing comes from the backbone organization. So that's where these two components came from.
It is tragedy
and then,
here or
all thoughts are welcome. They did not like that model. And then a number of those, what again looks sort of hierarchical in the model that was on the piece of paper is much more, there is sort of consistent weight, if you will, across the various buckets that we have that are all supported in the staffing model that is the backbone organization. So there's some responsibility in the backbone organization to ensure that all of these various other groups are meeting and talking about what they need and consolidating that so there's awareness amongst everybody. So that's a lot of communications. And then we talked about some of the parameters that we thought would be important, so you can read the individual components of this. I just want to point out very clearly that data is all by itself and at the top. So,
oh, thank goodness.
Nicole can stop switching. Really needed to help her there. And the individual organizations that are in there, their projects, their roles, their resources are not replaced in any of this model, but they are coordinated and there's better awareness around this piece. So that part becomes really important. And the last couple of things that we noted is that the hope in some ways is that this is entered into with the expectation that it's a time-limited engagement, that this is not a new thing that needs to be forever, that we have a collective goal, and as we get closer to that goal, this might not be necessary forever and ever and ever. Potentially thinking about an organization that can take this on as a new role, but not newly creating another entity that is completely separate. Again, partly because of that time-limited expectations, that it will be incredibly important to maintain and respect partner organizations and their agendas, and we recognize that those aren't always in alignment with each other, and that's part of this process. So we have to anticipate disagreement and conflict and come early with thoughts about how we're going to handle that, because this could all dissolve if we didn't think about that in the design phase. Round of applause for
Sarah's picture, so that's fine. I guess we'll do the galaxy next for table 6. You already talked about it. All right. Hi everyone. I'm going to stand in front of Joe's since you stood in front of mine. We went with a galaxy, sort of like constellation-y, very celestially inspired. Thank you, Phil, for the celestial word. We consider it sort of like there needs to be opportunities for outward influence and inward influence. So that's why we went with more of this model instead of the hierarchical. The center or the sun is our steering committee, or ultimately the end user of what we're working toward, which is families, children, providers, and ultimately taxpayers too, right? Because they benefit. And then the planets are all these different buckets. So we have quality programs and workforce with an atmosphere of equity that feeds into a shooting star towards research. And this constellation is projects and pilots that are just sort of, that are existing in the ecosystem or are part of this, but maybe not directly informing it, but they're in there. And then leadership and staff are these rocket ships shuttling between all of these different things, because the people that are going to carry the work aren't sedentary. They're going to be sort of deeply involved in all of this. What else am I missing? Oh, the star up top is the Fed. We have larger external contexts that are completely outside of our control and are still a part of this. Additionally, what did we say? Like advocacy has a moon of policy. Liz, what did you want to add? Money, fiscal, cost of care, revenue, little money moons all around it.
Is it 3 billion now, or is it 2 billion?
It's gotta be 3. Massachusetts was 4. We must be 3 by comparison. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Oh, we're done. You can take I relinquished my minute. Round of applause.
Whoever's next. Who's got, you guys, you're next on this one?
No, we're just gonna go.
What table is that? What table number?
We're 5.
5, thanks. So I'm definitely gonna bust my time. I'm gonna try not to. Okay, so I'm gonna give you all a name for a lot of the concepts that you're talking about called sociocracy that I learned about in a podcast. Highly recommend. And so essentially, what the principle talks about is you kind of dump all the decisions out on the table. Okay, and as a way to distribute power evenly across organizations and coalitions and whatnot. So you dump all the decisions out on the table, and then you divide them amongst however it needs to be divided. So right here, I've just picked 4 to start with here. And so then once the decision-making authority is within the committee, you can have other committees within that. And so what this basically says is that within that committee, they have the authority, the full authority to make that decision. And so the committees kind of reveal themselves based on the decisions that need to be made, but I'll give some examples. We'll call this committee the policy committee, and there's an advocacy committee and a comms committee, messaging and campaign development. And within each of these subcommittees has representation from each of the others. So A has somebody from C and B inside of A. And then in this one committee has representation from A, B, and C. And then this center committee makes up what everybody likes to traditionally call the steering committee, but it's the central circle. So really, you have representation from all of the subcommittees and then all of the subcommittees into a larger circle. And
We Googled it.
yes, it's a really cool concept. And what happens within the committees is that somebody will make a proposal to the committee. Every person gets to say what they think about the proposal, and then everybody says whether they object or accept the proposal. But it's a consensual decision making, so everybody has to agree. And at the end of the day, the person that disagrees can only disagree not because they think there's a better solution per se, but because it undermines the mission of what it is that the organization or the committee is trying to accomplish. And then they can speak their piece, because you want that input, that this is gonna undermine what it is that we're trying to do. And because of the layout here, where you have committees, you have people from every committee in the representation of all of the committees, then you end up with full perspective and buy-in, and also like well-distributed power across all of the committees as well. But their final decision on this is not up for debate. They've made that decision, and that's what it needs to be. Does anybody have questions? Fully explain that well.
That's really clever.
It's really, I didn't make it up, so go.
You brought it. You brought it.
It's a really cool structure, and I like it a lot. And, equity and revenue is built into all of the things, so that's not separated out. And implementation, monitoring, and evaluation, each committee is responsible for their own, so it needs to be baked into each piece of it. Table, anybody? No? Okay.
That's really great.
Round of applause.
Oh, okay. That's not part of the rules. I'm learning something. Yeah, that's right.
So, hi everyone. So we love all of that, and we think it's really important that we can talk about something all the time. So we really need decisions and decision makers. So we really talked about who's the steering committee, and so we didn't flesh it out completely, but I'll say that we landed that we should have about 7 people. They should be representative from sort of buckets, so right, someone who's a grassroots parent, maybe organization there. And we actually had a robust conversation about this idea of what is the coalition? Is it a campaign for 10 years? What's the sort of process? But we really believe that while we shouldn't have a backbone organization, that we really do need a coalition or a campaign director. We need a boss, someone to tell people what to do and to create alignment and get things to happen, to say, here's our overall vision, but in 2027, here's our plan. Policy folks, we need you to do this. Legislative folks, we need to do this, because we certainly have concerns that the more we continue, that we won't actually get anywhere. So we really are interested, we don't like hierarchy, but we do like decision making. So that's really, I think, I wanted to add that new flavor to the mix, that we're hoping for some direction and people to direct us to do things and have deliverables.
Accountability.
Very good. Very good. Table 1. All right. Table 2.
Very short arms. Okay, so one of the first things we did was sort of flatten the diagram. We didn't want it to be like a hierarchy. We like the central hub sort of letting out. Sorry. But also we did a little bit talk about what is that central hub. We didn't come to a consensus on it. We sort of brainstormed a lot of ideas. Some sort of neutral, nonpartisan, meaning like not being perceived as partisan even, but some sort of neutral organization. Maybe it's the leads of each of these committees is the hub, and they're kind of reporting in and out. We talked about having parent and provider voices on there, and how that logistically we need to figure out how could you do that, how would you fund their capacity to spend time doing this, that sort of thing. There's arrows. The arrows indicate that there's an in and out communication that is very important. We don't want these committees existing in isolation, that there needs to be a lot of connection. But the different topics we have listed, we have inclusion and equity, policy, legislative and implementation, research and data. Revenue, we had a hard time figuring out where it goes. So it sort of is reporting to a lot of places, but that there needs to be obviously a focus on revenue as well. The workforce piece, which is outlined in the initial example there, communications and media, and then an organizing and grassroots bucket, which could involve community, business, geographic or regions, immigrant, provider. Someone brilliant brought up the idea of a subcommittee around elections. It was me. Recognizing that we need to have some, even if that's just C3, like mobilizing people, to turn up for elections in thinking about champions for childcare when they go to the polls. It doesn't have to be C4 endorsement stuff, but that needs to be part of the policy and part of the process.
Amazing. Okay, does that take care of all the tables? Yeah? Awesome. All right, Matt and Beverly, I know you wanted to do a little discussion. Would you still like to do that?
There's time.
So the individual tables have had a chance to make their presentations. We thought it would be nice, sometimes there isn't time in the schedule of the day to do that, but we thought it would be nice to allow an opportunity for folks.
There's a spider on your shoulder.
Thank you. It would be nice.
Willy-nilly on the spider on the floor.
Like,
The
thanks, Matt.
carpeting is very, the carpeting is suitable for this because no one can see where it is now. So